The podcast that floats down here.
Hi, I'm Melissa, your Stephen King veteran.
Hi, I'm Ben, the Stephen King and horror film fanboy.
And hello, I'm Luke, your first-time Stephen King reader.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast that floats down here. Tonight we'll be discussing Part 4, July 1958, chapter number 15, which is called The Smoke Hole. This chapter was 29 pages long, and it was 2.66% of the book. Alright, so, I'm going to start my first thought on this. Oh dear God, the idea of Richie Tozier on coke. Talk about turning it to 11. He makes the comment of the feeling that he's getting is kind of that euphoric as they're meeting in the library, that meeting, which we've gotten all of about 6 minutes of so far in the last 4 chapters. But he's talking about this euphoric feeling that he's starting to get. It's almost like a coke high, and he's like, I've done it about 9 or 10 times. Like, Jesus, that brain on coke would just be a scary thought to see.
It's such a late 70s, early 80s thing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's still somewhat around today, but not nearly what it was.
I don't think it's just casual, like, hey, let's just have it at a party. That's what we do for,
that's true.
Famous people fun. At least not that I know of as much, but very, very late 70s.
Yeah, Luke, what's your first note on this?
First note actually comes kind of right after that, and it's the whole sequence about how you don't stop being a kid all at once. It's not, one big explosive thing. I really liked the way he kind of describes that, and I'm not going to read the entire thing, but to kind of pick and pull a few of the kind of choice lines. He's like, he thought he recognized the feeling from his childhood when he had felt it every day and had come to take it merely as a matter of course. And then it goes on to say, but that slipped away somewhere between 18 and 24 to be replaced with something much duller, something as bogus as a coke high, purpose, maybe goals, or whatever rah-rah junior Chamber of Commerce word you wanted to use. I like the way it kind of goes a little bit further. He's like, the kid in you just leaked out. Like the idea, or like the air out of a tire. And one day you looked in the mirror and there was a grown-up looking back at you. And I don't know, I think he describes that pretty well. It's, you just realize, I'm getting more tired every day, or, you don't have the same, it's just a natural thing of growing up, and you don't realize it until you really start feeling like, wow, everything sucks, or like everything hurts. I'm always tired.
Everything hurts, and I'm always tired. And it's that age fairy that he talked about, right? It's so damn true. Like, the age fairy came and took away my ability to ride a bike, and it came and it took away my ability to ride roller coasters, and it came and it took away my ability to, all kinds of things. And I don't think I'm that old. And when I run into people when I was like in high school, they're like, wow, you haven't changed at all. I'm like, have you seen the wrinkles here and the crow's feet here and the circles under my eyes and the 3 kids tailing after me? Like, no, honey, I'm old.
The circles under your eyes is just from podcasting all the time. At least that's my excuse.
Actually, my circles are a lot better with podcasting than they used to be. It's because I'm really old, right? You're just now getting your 30 circles.
I guess so.
My 30 circles are wearing off and becoming 40s crow's feet. It's fine.
I think maybe we're just getting more efficient with our recordings and such.
That too. So, my next note, I'm not sure if one of yours covers before this, but he has a line of, if he had remembered everything all at once, the force would have been like a psychological shotgun blast an inch from his temple. It would torn off the whole top of his head. So, question to this is it possible that's what happened to Stan? And since his was the first phone call we got...
Stan's, you mean?
Stan's was the first phone call that was made. Maybe whatever is pulling them back to Derry shotgunned all that information to Stan, which caused him to make the decision that he had. It just
And then I wonder, did that thing say, okay, well, I can't possibly give it to all of them. If he's going to do that, then...
Exactly, and that's why he held it off to let it trickle in. I just thought about that as I was reading it an hour ago. Like, I've ever had that thought before, but just that line hit me, and I was like, huh. It kind of makes me stop and think, because Stan was our first one to get the phone call.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we learned, wait, we can't give him all this information. It's too overloading.
He got too much, and so they were like, okay, hold on.
Mm-hmm.
The powers that be, or whatever they are like, maybe we don't do that again.
Yeah, or let's go with a slow amount, like an air being released from a balloon.
Yeah, like, or being filled back up.
Yeah.
If the getting old process, man, Richie Tozier is so smart. Let me just say that, like, in general, reading his section on being this adult part right here, he's just so smart. But the idea that youth leaks out of you, that you'd almost need this filling back up, right? So you fill back up with all your memories, and you fill back up with that euphoric childhood feeling, and you fill back up with those things. And if you had done it too quickly, you would have burst the balloon.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Luke, what's your thoughts? Oh, go ahead, Melissa.
I was going to say, speaking of balloons, let's talk about Richie making the connection between Pennywise being like Rodney Dangerfield in drag. That was awesome.
Yeah, I was going to make that same note, but I saw yours. I'm like, okay. But yeah.
It's so funny, so true. The dad jokes are on point, and they're horrible. And Rodney Dangerfield made an entire career, God bless him, he was just fantastic, an entire career of making those really bad puns.
Still, the one gets me is and Stan Yurus is just ahead, or it's still ahead, or something like that.
It's finally ahead.
It's finally ahead. That's it. Thank you. Yeah.
Just reminds me of watching video games with, actually, it wasn't you guys, it was Matthew, and we were at a neighbor's house.
I know the Pitfall.
Hey, I wonder what's ahead. And the next thing was this giant rock head.
Mm-hmm. It was Pitfall.
That's what it reminds me of.
And yes.
Yep, that's exactly it.
I was there too.
I wonder what's ahead.
So Luke, go ahead with your next thought.
Yeah, so there's a lot of really interesting things in here. And they kind of have this quick, conversation about, while they're still in 1985 of, it was here, wasn't it? I'm not sure what that means much, and then Bill's like, no, those are just images. I'm not sure that means it can see us or what we're up to. You can see a news commentator on the TV, but he can't see you. And they kind of have this conversation that's cut off, and Richie leaves it with, images are real. Sure they are. And then this is right when he figures out what the stinging behind the eyes was. And so it's another, hey, let's stop the progressive conversation that we're having, figuring things out, or at least talking about things as grown-ups, to get pulled back into everything else, which is fine. That's what we've done pretty much every chapter. And right before this, I like Richie kind of remembering back to the time he was in an airplane as it skidded off the runway, and kind of the way, again, King, his descriptions are really incredible. I mean, just the way he makes you feel like you were in, like this was a one-paragraph, one-off thing that we're never going to hear about in this story, I'm assuming, and like, it just makes you feel like, like, if you've ever been on the highway and you spun out, as Melissa and I were just talking about the other day, or if you've been in a car accident.
Done that yesterday and survived. Go me. Sorry. Sidebar. Go.
Like, that feeling of, like, your heart racing right after it, and you're like, just that laughter of relief, like, whoa, like, that could have been really bad. But I'm laughing because it wasn't. I laugh in the face of danger. Ha 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 ha, kind of thing. And it's so well described in just a short period of time. And I really enjoy the way that King writes.
Yeah. So you guys both have fairly similar next notes. So whoever would like to take it, go ahead.
I think, does this come from now when they had finally, we've headed back to 1958?
What's, the realization, or, I'm sorry, I don't know I don't understand the question.
Well, that's my next note, is when we're back in 1958. So,
well, he remembers, he recalls it. No, it goes right into it. So he recalls where the pain in his eyes, where he finally remembered it from. Yeah, but this was in...
Luke mentioned it.
Yeah, well, yes, but this is in 85. And so I was looking at your note as well, so that's all. Okay, so anyway, then yes. Next note, me and Melissa have very similar ones that...
Looks like all three of us do, actually.
Do we all have the same note?
Yes.
We do. I didn't scroll up on yours, Luke. So yeah, I'll take this one, and you guys can expand on it. But, Richie, this is where the second-in-command role kind of comes for Richie, because he feels that he knows Bill the best, apart from maybe Audra nowadays. But back in that time, he's the only one that could understand him, and even through all the stutters and everything, he could figure him out.
Yeah, I mean, Richie definitely understanding Bill better than anyone. This doesn't surprise me at all. I've been able to tell there's a kind of a special connection between these two. Every time they've been together, like one-on-one, they've been... In this group, to me, the power couple, if that makes sense. Like, they make each other much better. And yeah, Richie is kind of abrasive when he's in front of the whole group. But I mean, every time we've been in his head, he is one of the smartest people we've seen in this book, as Melissa was just saying. And Benji, I think you're right. He's completely the second in command, and they work well. And Richie, more than anybody else, Richie understands everyone else. Is how I feel about it. He is very empathetic to everyone else and can kind of get in their heads. And maybe that is a big reason why he's so successful later in life with the voices, because he can get inside people's heads and he experiences who they are. And that's kind of something he can feed off of with creating these characters later on.
Agreed. Melissa, anything further on that line?
Nope, you guys said it.
Okay, fair enough. One little note I had right before my note on that. I have to agree with Richie. Sextet is just a fun word to say. Of the number descriptors, it's the most fun. So, Luke, it looks like you had something else.
Yeah, I know we sort of touched on this, but like that smoke in the eyes feeling, that stinging, that's obviously kind of a revelation here, for me, and, it is very fitting. Like, I know that feeling. I hate that feeling. I love sitting by fires, but I hate that feeling. Or like over the barbecue pit, and you're like, I can't even see what I'm doing because my eyes are watering. It just hurts.
I just hate the feeling of my contacts being so dried out, and that's when he was doing it earlier. Like, that's why my eyes hurt, because of the smoke, but it dried that sharp, like, almost stabbing feeling your contacts make when they dry out. It's a horrible feeling.
Yeah. Agreed. And then looks like
and so then there's also, right when they go back to 1958, there's kind of the description of a mosquito, and Richie's like, there was a broken mosquito body in the center of an irregular blood patch. My blood, Richie thought, which was shed for you and for many, which was kind of funny, as he pulls references from everywhere, including religious references pretty often. And that's a pretty fun one. And then Bill's like, don't worry, little fucker will never get to dance the tango again. I just thought that was just a nice little interaction between those two.
And I don't like mosquitoes, so that makes me happy that they killed it.
Yeah. I did like the touch of him showing the dead mosquito. It wasn't just Bill being kind of an ass, just, hey, you got a mosquito on you, whack! Because, let's admit it, you probably have pulled that prank before. Oh, where's the mosquito? I missed him. So we get to the smoke hole. We get to the clubhouse. Bill and Richie are at the clubhouse together. And we get the who's trip-trapping upon my door line from Eddie this time, actually, referencing Three Billy Goats Gruff.
In the future, from that point, it was referenced. No. Oh, okay. He says it when they are first over there?
Yeah. He, cause when, Richie kind of stomps on the thing, hey, let us in, Eddie pops it up and says, who's trip-trapping upon my bridge? And it's a callback. Again, we've heard the story from Ben's perspective from when he was in the library hearing the story back when he was a kid and as an adult. So it was just, I thought that was a nice little connection there. But also, I had to look this one up because, yes, I was born later than this. Well, yeah, or just the year before this book came out. But, the Pancho Villa voice with the badges. We don't need no stinking badges.
Yeah, Blazing Saddles.
Yes, I've always attributed to Blazing Saddles, but that doesn't make sense because Blazing Saddles came out in 1976. So I'm like, did King just make that mistake? No, it's actually a line in a movie called The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, where Blazing Saddles kind of made up.
Yeah, I figured it was a spoof of something.
It is. So I was like, wait, did he make a kind of a questionable timeline jump thing on going back to 58? Nope. I stand corrected, and so well done on getting your times correct, because that movie came out in 1948, I believe, when I looked it up. Yeah. So anyway, who's got, I think Melissa got the next part of when they're standing at the door.
So everybody's playing, right? They're all role playing and imaginative playing about coming in and shooting. And then Bill says, come out with your hands up. You haven't got a chance. Come out of there, punks, or we'll come in shooting. And he doesn't stutter at all. And so Richie, was looking at him wisely, it says, looking at him not as one child looks at another, but in that brief moment, as an adult looks at a child. He doesn't know that he doesn't always, Richie thought. And it's that idea that when Bill is being somebody else, it goes away. It's not there. That he can very easily not stutter when he isn't thinking about it, when he's choosing to be a different person. And that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, no, definitely. And actually, I'm glad you read that whole part, because I'd read your note right as I was going through mine, and he doesn't know that he always does it. And I read the line of he looked as like an adult looks at a child. I was reading that because I missed the first part of it, as Bill was looking at Richie as an adult, looks down, like, because Bill's the leader, Richie's the kid. But so I'm glad you reread that. So that makes a lot more sense to why that line is like that. So thank you. Luke, what's your next note?
So we start talking about the smoke hole, basically, and Ben kind of brings up, Bev kind of forces Ben to bring up what they were just talking about before Richie and Bill get there. And, he's talking about the ghosts of the Great Plains, and these are all, Indian tribes from the Great Plains of the United States, or, North America, I should say. And no wonder he ends up living in Hemingford Home, Nebraska later on, right? I mean, because he even says, I'd like to go and visit these places in someday. And I just thought that was interesting that we know, in fact, because he says it was a really good book. I'd love to go there sometime where they lived. Iowa, Nebraska, Colorado, Utah. And Bever's like, shut up and tell us about the smoke hole. Like, he's rambling a bit, but we know that that's something he ends up kind of caring about. It makes a lot of sense why he chooses to live in such a small town. There's probably something else going on around there historically that he finds, sentimental or significant for some reason later on.
Yeah, no, definitely. And again, that one kind of went over my head. I looked right past it, but I do like that. I think, so we get into the smoke hole, get in the clubhouse, Ben starts talking about the smoke hole and the visions and everything. And I like how Richie had the thought of, if anyone would have a vision, it'd be Bill. Well, he was wrong, and that we later find out he was wrong, and that it even says he was wrong about that. And yeah, I think all of us, probably on the first time read through or whatever, you would expect Bill would be, you get the leader trope, Bill's gonna be the one in there. Bill and Richie probably, or Bill and Mike, since Mike has whatever weird abilities, to see past stuff, but it ends up not happening that way. Just interesting that, and I'm sure Richie wasn't the only one in the group to feel that way. We just heard from his perspective.
Yeah, I'm not sold on Bill being as impressive as we always hear. And maybe we haven't really seen it. Everyone says so. I don't know. It's okay. What have you done for me lately? Maybe. Mike, not surprising to me at all. He's the one, absolutely, gonna make it through. And we'll talk about this in a little while. I've got questions about Mike still. I think it would have been neat if Eddie would have made it. Not surprising that he didn't, but I'm glad that he wasn't the first one out. Doesn't surprise me that Stan was the first one out.
Yeah.
Doesn't surprise me that Ben didn't quite hold up either. I'm glad Beverly wasn't one of the first 2 or 3 out. She was right there, right before Bill left, basically. And I'm not too surprised that Bill didn't make it. I think he's overrated in my opinion right now.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to, on this read through again, I couldn't remember the order. I was kind of hoping Bill was the first one out again, and so just for
it's got to be Stan because
yeah, I know. So Melissa, my next note and your next note are kind of tied together. I'm gonna start with, because we're getting to the point where Richie and, Bev get back with the rocks, and Bill confronts her saying, basically, we need somebody to stay out. Even though it was unfair of Bill to want her to stay, I give him credit because he was at least had the decency to admit the reason he didn't want her going in was because she was a girl. I'm not saying he was right. He was absolutely wrong and complete bullshit. But he at least has the decency to nod and say, yeah, you're right, So, and Melissa, I kind of ties right into your note.
Yeah, I was just like, damn, Bev, give the boy some shit for treating her like a fancy piece of porcelain that can break so easily.
Right.
She's like, fuck you, and the horse you rode in on. Like, I am part of this. I am one of the group, so y'all can just kiss my ass and get out of my way because I'm getting in there. And I like that. I like that she's shit all over that. Now, my kind of sarcastic snide comment is, when did she lose that as an adult? When did that leak out of her balloon? But Because obviously she doesn't keep that in her marriage with Tom, although maybe some of it comes back after Mike's phone call, right? Filling her balloon back up.
Right.
But it's so nice to see her being boss bitch and giving it to those stupid boys who think that just because she's a girl, she can't handle it. When really, she did better than almost all of them. So.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, Bill, he gets called out on it and admits it. Like, I don't think Richie, he was just, I believe him that he was teasing, right?
And I think she does too.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah,
Until
she
Bill
gives it to the whole group.
Yeah.
But, like, Richie was, he kind of broached the subject, but I think he had a more progressive viewpoint of, she could kick my ass. Like, she says that to him, and he's like, not denying that whatsoever.
Exactly, and I think once she goes off on Bill and then kind of turns to the group, she does include Richie with that because she probably may have read the situation as, oh, you say you were just joking, but now I see where you really are coming from with it. Maybe not giving him the same credit. She never really directly says anything to him. I'm inferring, so I hope maybe she realizes, hey, Richie was cool with it, but she doesn't call that one out to the rest of them.
But yeah, then they all go through and kind of...
Well, then they do the matches.
Yeah.
Right. Well, they all tell her, okay, you're right, it's all kind of the same. They all tell her that they love her as they're pulling the matches.
But they do the matches so that, like, they can do the whole somebody's got to stay up, and she's like, bullshit, it ain't gonna be me. And so she finds a way to do it so that it's fair.
Yeah.
And then the magic of the matches where they're pulling them out, and even though one was burned, they all come out unburned. It's like they're all going in.
Yeah. And she had a fair argument of, if anybody should fucking stay up, it's Eddie, who's got asthma.
I know, that pansy ass.
Yeah. And again, give credit to Eddie he makes it quite a while. So, all right. Oh, the next line I have in there is after all the matches were found to have not been burnt. Bill has a line to Bev of, how do you know? And Bev's like, I just do. And then we have the bird whistle again. It kind of reminded me of like a Phoenix lament, kind of, because there was a couple lines in there where something profound was said and then a bird whistle and sang, kind of thing.
And that's the one where it says like, they didn't know what kind of bird, but Stan would know.
Yeah, exactly. It's along those lines. So it was just one of those, I thought that just kind of an interesting line in there of, because I caught it a couple times, but this is the one that stood out was, she's like, I just do. And the bird sang, and the bird whistled again. So who you got the next line?
Something that goes kind of along with them getting ready for the smoke hole encounter beforehand was when Richie feeling like the group is such a group. And he said, after all the years of being counted out, he was counted in, finally counted in. He didn't know if they were still losers or not, but he knew they were together. They were friends, damn good friends. And I like that idea of him realizing that they weren't just a group of losers hanging out, but they weren't just people drawn together for whatever, but like they were actually friends, collectively friends. Not, I'm friends with this person and he's friends with that, but we all are friends with all of us. And it's really fun to watch a group of kids be that connected to each other all the way around.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, it's usually, okay, well, I'm friends with him, and he's friends with him, and, she's their cousin, so she's a part of the group, but it's, everyone has their place, and everyone is welcome, and, they are literally all individually friends, and as a group friends, and that's pretty rare.
Yeah, I kind of always like the saying, family are the friends you don't choose, friends are the family you do choose. So, and I get the feeling from this 7 that these are the family that they're choosing. They're, wanting to be around each other. Yeah, there's something drawing them together, but they know it's right. They know it's the fit. So we get into the smoke hole itself. It starts filling up, and I don't know about you. I'm probably lasting about the time of Bev, if I'm lucky. I'm probably out on Ben. Probably out third. Just cause. No,
Ben was second.
Ben was second.
Yeah, Eddie beat him.
Yeah, I'll take Eddie. I'll take third. I ain't making that full way through. Yeah, that burned me up. But, so yeah, we have Stan goes out first, Ben goes out second, and every time right before the door opens, well, Brad for Stan leaves, but after that, every time before the door opens, the room seems to be larger, and there's more spaciousness. Melissa, I know you have a kind of a note on that, so I don't want to...
You just did, so it's good.
Sorry, I was trying to just lead into it.
But I think there's a couple different takes on it. I think the way Melissa has it worded is different than how I think of it. So will you read what you have written there, Melissa?
Sure. I said the clubhouse grows inside unless someone leaves, and then it shrinks again. At least that's what happened the first few times. Not so much when Bev and Bill left, but the first couple of times Richie had said, like, oh yeah, it's getting bigger because he couldn't feel people's shoulders anymore next to him. But then as soon as the smoke hole opened and the smoke cleared, he could feel them touching him again. So it was growing, and then it would open and like lose that magic and shrink again. But by the time Bill and Bev left, it was so big that it didn't have time to shrink all the way back down. So it wasn't just growing, it was ebbing and flowing based on how the amount of time between opens of the top, I guess.
Right. And I guess when I saw your note, I read it as, that it shrinks and grows like when a person leaves, not necessarily like some of the smoke was let out. And yeah, because I viewed it as more like, okay, well, the door opened, so it was vented a little bit more, and some of the magical smoke in this case would leak out, which is a bit of a theme in this chapter. And so yeah, and then yeah, I think when you brought it to the time that they spend in there between openings, is it becomes more potent, it becomes more dense of the smoke, and that's when the magic can truly kind of develop within them. And yeah, Mike and Richie are, a whole ballroom apart from each other by the time that they
but not
reach
really.
out. Right, but in the time they reach out and grab hands, and
see, that's why I don't know if there's actual magic in that part of it. I mean, there's definitely magic later when there's, time travel and crap. But, like, the ebbing and flowing of the size of the thing, it's when he reaches out just across and can touch him, no problem. It's like, oh, I don't know if it's growing. I think it's like being high. It's like having smoked something that I don't think it's that it is actually growing necessarily. I mean, it might be, but it also could just be their perception is so
skewed
off. Yeah. That it feels like, and maybe I'm too much of a realist to buy into the magic of it all. Like, I definitely think the vision was true, but the ebbing and flowing and the turning into Sherlock Holmes and all those kinds of things, I think was very, it's perception as opposed to the actual vision.
It kind of, that part of it did definitely remind me of like going to the dentist, and I don't know if either one of you have it, but nitrous, to have like serious work done. You get the nitrous, get the O2, whatever going, and you're floating, and like it sounds like echoes are coming through, and it's basically a lack of oxygen with a different chemical rotating in, so your brain's not getting as much oxygen. Obviously, they're not getting much oxygen in here. So yeah, the difference in dimensions and sight lines and everything like that, it kind of makes sense to, like you were saying, Melissa, like a form of being high, of kind of just, and who's to say those green plants that they got weren't some certain green plants that we all know the effects of, but so they were all kind of, you get that high feeling, get that sensation. The one thing that kind of brought me, or made me think, or relate a little bit more even, is Bill's voice. When Bill's like, hey, are you guys alright? And Richie's like, they slam back down. They just start to float. And Bill's like, are you guys alright? And it's like, dude, you're killing my buzz here. Shut up. Let me enjoy this. Let me work this out. It's, cause that does happen again, cause you get that mental click of somebody talking to you, and you're like, oh, okay, I have to focus again, and you're back out. It brings you out of whatever you're in. So, but by this point, they were so far gone, it only took a few more seconds of just relaxing, and they were off.
You say it was seconds, they have no idea. It could have been a really long time. I mean, time is it's hard to tell how long they were really in there. I mean, yes. It could have been 20 minutes and it could have been 3 hours.
True.
And I've never been able to figure out one way or the other how long it took. There's been no, time stamp on it for me.
That's true. I was kind of going with the pacing of the narrator, because again, audiobook-wise, he does pick up his pacing.
Oh, I know. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, I wonder what the real time was.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Time and space, man. And it's all wonky.
It's so 70s.
It very much is. And
so written by a guy who lived through the 60s.
Yeah. This feels almost like one of those tropey, drug-induced, hallucinogen sequences in movies, Mm-hmm. It reminds me of, and there's so
that
many
70s show where you just go around the circle with
the Big Lebowski with the unicorns and
or even Anchorman. There's so many things where it's just like, okay, Rick and Morty, they do this at times as well. Some of it's dimension jumping through wormholes and stuff, but it's a very similar out of body experience, man. And you just have to go with the flow and don't get too grounded, which is what it kind of seems like happens when, as you mentioned, Benj, when Bill shouts in, like, hey, are you alright? Like, they're grounded again, and because they're brought back to reality for a minute, and as soon as they can kind of zone back in together, man, it's all off to the races.
Are you saying snap back to reality?
Oh,
Whoops.
there goes gravity. Absolutely.
So, alright, Melissa, what's your next note?
I just have that they were floating. We mentioned that already.
Okay, that's just sure. Alright, Luke, go ahead with yours.
So some of this actually happens kind of as they're going down into the smoke hole and starting it, and Mike and Richie are there, but like there's the comment that it was nice to imagine that something bigger than you, smarter than you, was doing the thinking for you, and I just, in my head, was like, turtle, like the whole time, because he's referencing the idea that something's bringing us together, and it's kind of nice to have this, but then he also, comes back and he's like, I don't know how I like that in the long run, though, like not making my own choices, like the lack of free will kind of concept is brought up for a second, and that's something I know we've been touching on in our conversations of how much is actually them, and how much is, whatever.
Some sort of divine force of fate pulling them together.
Yeah, exactly. So I just wanted to touch on that even Ben, or Richie, is kind of like, I don't know how I feel about this, but it's clearly happening.
Yeah.
And then kind of the final thing I had before we really do our big timey-wimey jump here, is the line where Richie and Mike are the last two in there, and it kind of starts with, how are you feeling, Rich? Mike asked. Richie smiled. Better. Good, almost. You? Mike nodded and smiled back. I feel okay. Have you been having some funny thoughts? Yeah, I thought I was Sherlock Holmes for a minute there. Then I thought I could dance like the DeVelles. Your eyes are so red you wouldn't believe it, Yours too. Just a couple of weasels in the pen. That's what we are. Yeah? Yeah. You want to say all right? All right. You want to say you got the word? I got it, Mikey. Yeah, okay. And so, this is, again, the audiobook narrator really kind of gets a jive going here between these two. They're meshing, and they are in this together, and this is, they're just choosing to be there with each other and for each other in this moment, and I thought it was just a really special friend moment between those two that we haven't really seen them connect before, because this is also kind of right after they reach out and touch each other's arms, and kind of hold on to each other a little bit, and it's just, I don't know, kind of a nice moment between these two to kind of have confidence in each other, to go into whatever this unknown is together, kind of a commitment to each other.
No, absolutely agreed. And it was kind of, I saw your note, it kind of made me think of, I think this is the first time we get a one-on-one Mike and Richie. And it kind of goes to show how Richie can turn himself to play to his audience, for lack of a better term, he's like, you got the word, I got the word, and he can, like you said, jive right back and forth with him. I mean, yeah, we've seen them talk and we've seen them interact, but that's always been in the group or as the whole, at least as far as we've seen, we've never seen a one-on-one. So this is kind of another reaffirmation of, as Richie said, they were all part of the group, they were all meant to be there, and Mike is just as much as one of them as the rest of them who Richie's been hanging out with all summer. So, we flash back to, I'm just gonna call it a go, as it's called, We, get back to a prehistoric style era. River is huge. I did like the line of the stillness and the alienness of this land were both terrible, but its familiarity was somehow worse. I can understand that, feeling it's almost like, it's almost right, but just off. It's a weird sort of, deja vu, kind of, where where it's supposed to be, you know how it's supposed to be, but it's not quite there, and so it just feels completely wrong.
But at the same time, you know exactly where you are. You're not somewhere completely foreign.
Yes, exactly. And that's kind of, the point that they were getting to was I know where I'm at, but this is just not right. And it's just, it was so well described of the area and the existence.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Go ahead, Melissa. Oh, go ahead.
No, right along with, did anyone else get the feeling, put yourself in a position where you've been in something like that, when you go back to your high school and no one is
closed.
The same? Well, if you, or any place that you used to spend a lot of time with a certain group of people, all, for a long period of time, and then you go back to that place, and the place is the same, but the people are all different. So it's
yes,
it's so close to being right, but this is not for me anymore. This is not not my version of this. So that's kind of the alienness that I, in my own life experience, can kind of relate to. The easiest thought, at least.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely.
Or even a restaurant you used to work at.
So, Melissa, you got the next part?
I do. So they get there and once they finally sort of adjust for where they are physically in the space and like account for, okay, well, this is my river, only this is not my river. I can't walk across this river on stepping stones. I need a bridge and I better not fall in. Like I can fall in my river, but not this one. It really, all of a sudden, like, all these animals. And it says, like, not a dozen or a few dozen birds, but the sky was lit up it was dark with birds, and the animals knew something was coming. Like, the animals could sense it before the humans could sense it. And then eventually, just like, the tuning bell, like, they could hear it in their bones, and they could feel it in their feet, and then they could hear it, this thing, whatever it was, coming. But I like that the animals knew first. It had a very Bambi-esque feel to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Any movie where there's, like, giant calamity going on, or many dinosaur type movies, like, oh, there's a meteor coming and everyone's fleeing, and this is kind of telling us very similar to that type story.
Yeah, rule of thumb, if you're ever in a movie and you see a bunch of animals running away, follow them. Go that way.
Animals.
Go that way. So, Luke, go ahead. Explain what happens.
Explain? I don't fucking know. But they realized...
Yes, that's about right.
They realized that they were about to see the coming of it, which, like, when they said that, I was like, okay, I mean, that makes sense, but, like, I never would have anticipated we were going to have a potentially 10 million, 80 million years before the story setting scene. Like, that just doesn't happen in books. We don't have and now we're going to jump back 80 million years, like, unless it's, like, big science fiction, which is, like, awesome, and I love that. I love big history, and what?
You didn't know Stephen King does that? By the way, he does that.
I like it. Like, I was just like, what the fuck just happened? Like, really? We're doing this right now? Like, I loved it. I don't know what the fuck it means, but I sure do like it.
Okay, so you know how every once in a while we'll, like, come across something like, hey, if you want to read more about Stephen King writing about that, read this book. Here's your recommendation. If you want to read more about Stephen King talking about random things you find in the ground that don't belong there from outside of the earth, read the Tommyknockers.
Okay. There's our Stephen King veteran doing what she does best.
Annoying people and making references. Yep.
Here's an illusion that only I'm going to know. The Tommyknockers. All right.
I will preface it, though, just as a warning. It is my least favorite of the Stephen King books. Personally, that's just, like, it was just, I had to pick that one up 3 different times over the course of, like, 5 years to try and get through it. But you might like it better than me. I'm not saying don't read it. It's King, right? It's good no matter what. It's just not my fave of all of his.
Fair. I haven't read that one yet either. I'll have to check it out. I've heard of it, and I've seen it around, just never picked it up.
Put it this way. If you guys decide to do a podcast about it, I'm not going to be joining.
Fair. All right.
Better choices.
So basically, Mike and Richie see the coming, see whatever land, and just as it was about to open up, they start screaming and are awoken, free from the smoke hole. And they start to kind of ask, what happened? What did the other 4 see? Why did they pull them out? What happened when they started to pull them out? And first thing or Richie, I'll let Melissa kind of take this because we kind of have a similar note. So go ahead.
Yeah, Richie basically asks, we weren't there at first, were we? You went down because you heard us screaming. For the first, we weren't there. Like, and he knows it, not in like a scared way, just like, yeah, I know we weren't there. I know we weren't in that space. I'm glad you got us, but we weren't there.
Yeah, and then it kind of gets into what we were talking about, of how Ben and Bilbo said we jumped down, and yeah, we couldn't find you. The place was huge. It was like we were kind of searching around, and it was a lot bigger than what the clubhouse should have been. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of what we were talking about. Was that just a mental trick or a trick of the brain going on, or a physical adaptation of, something that they actually saw? So that's a little bit of confirmation of, Bill and Ben might still have been having some effects, but probably not so much. So we're getting more confirmation of that. Then they start to ask, Bill and Ben and the others start to ask Mike and Richie what they saw. Luke, go ahead.
Yeah, and they they don't really know. They kind of reference, it came out of the sky, Mike, said, but it wasn't a spaceship exactly. It wasn't a meteor either. It was more like the Ark of the Covenant. Like, it just an out of place thing for what's going on here. And I know you guys are going to ask me about it. I don't know what the hell it was. But
and for me, the worst part wasn't what it was, it's where it's from.
It's from nowhere and everywhere. It's not like from outer space. It's from like a non-existent different dimension almost is what it feels like. I don't know is there a specific line that you're referencing about it?
Just a little bit. And it said, Richie nodded, it came from outside. I got that feeling from outside. Outside where, Richie? Eddie asked. Outside everything, Richie said. And when it came down, it made the biggest damn hole you ever saw in your life. It turned this big hole into a donut just about. It landed right where the downtown part of Derry is now. Do you get it? So that idea that, like, it comes from outside, and he says something, trying to think of it, he said something in another spot, too, that you could tell that it wasn't coming just from, like, another planet or another galaxy. Let's see if I can find that line, too.
Yeah, that's the one that I was thinking of.
Well, that was when he was explaining it to everybody else. Let me see if I can find that other one. Here it is. It was not a spaceship, although it might have come through space to get here. Whatever came down on that long ago day had come from a place much farther away than another star or another galaxy. And if spaceship was the first word to come to mind, perhaps that was only because his mind had no other way of grasping what his eyes were seeing.
So this is before they get taken out, right? That's like as he's seeing it?
This is literally his initial, how do I physically comprehend what is in front of my face with the only background knowledge I can make connections to.
Yeah. And I do like that it's Mike who describes it as the Ark of the Covenant because we know his background going to the religious private school. That's his only frame of reference that he could have because it doesn't make sense. That wouldn't make sense, but it's the only thing you can come up with. And so using that as his metaphor, or as his, whatever he could use, it made a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm. So then, Melissa just read the part where it says, or one of you just read it where it hits and it leaves this huge hole and made this whole place a donut, and it hit right in what is now downtown Derry. And kind of at I'm just going to read the very last couple lines of this chapter, and it says, that's why it uses the sewers and the drains, Richie put in. They must be regular freeways for it. You didn't see what it looked like? Stan Uris asked abruptly and a little hoarsely. They shook their heads. Can we beat it? Eddie said in the silence. A thing like that? No one answered. Right when it was, it's clear that this is where it gets inserted into this heart of Derry, of whatever, and, as the infrastructure's been built up around and deep inside Derry, it just kind of eases the transportation access for whatever this force is, whatever this spirit is. And, when we were talking about it comes from outside, I just keep thinking of, is it coming from the Upside Down from Stranger Things, right? It's like an alternate, parallel,
dimensional,
mirror dimension. And, I don't know. I have thoughts, but nothing where it's like, that's what it is. Like, I'm grasping at air. I'm grasping at smoke on this one.
Yeah, you are.
Like, try to catch smoke with your bare hands.
Fill your balloon back up?
We're going to get into our next section of questions for the new readers. Melissa, looks like you got the first one.
So I'm going to start by reading a quote, and then I have a question about it for you, Luke. The boys crossed to the center of the clearing, and a piece of ground, about 10 inches long by 3 inches wide, swung up with a dirty squall of hinges, revealing a black eyelid. Eyes looked out of that blackness, giving Richie a momentary chill. But they were only Eddie Kaspark's eyes, and it was Eddie, whom he would visit in a hospital a week later, who intoned hollowly, who is that trip-trapping on my bridge? So my question for you is, why is Richie going to visit Eddie in the hospital in a week?
Because his mom's going to find out about this, and she's going to think he's having some kind of lung cancer from it, and send him to the hospital for a week, because she's awful.
Okay.
That's my guess. It's related to this, is my guess, because I could see him being there for a week due to her, psychosis, for lack of a better term.
Yes. Okay, sounds good.
All right. What does Bill want to do only if Beverly is okay with it.
So this is towards the beginning of the chapter where Richie's kind of talking to Bill about the bullets. Well, kind of. They're not really giving all of the information to each other, it seems like. And Bill's like, yeah, go ahead and do it. I have something else I want to try, only if Bev wants to. And then it kind of stops, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is right when they walk up on the smoke hole, I think.
Yes.
What is it that he wants to try, only if Bev wants to? Well, to skip all of the obvious, not pertaining to the story, love triangle bullshit things that could be fitting here. I think Bill wants to go explore the drains at her house, at her condo or whatever, because he wasn't there when they heard the voices in the drain there, right? It was just Bill, Stan, and Richie. So he doesn't have first-hand experience with that. He's experienced the house on Nebel Street from Eddie's experience. And he's kind of going through this research phase of trying to figure out everything he can and get somewhat exposure to it safely. And so maybe he's kind of banking on the track record of, well, Bev's had experiences here 2 or 3 times now, and it's still safe, so maybe this is a safe way to kind of get some intel, is my thought.
Okay.
All right, my final question for you, Luke. If it wasn't a spaceship, what was that thing?
I mean, I definitely was thinking it was more of a meteor, but then that line specifically says it wasn't a spaceship, and it also wasn't a meteor, so it's kind of like, I mean, there goes what it seemed like, because it really feels like a meteor crash, especially for, the impact, the way the animals were reacting. It feels very natural to that kind of tropey thing, extinction type calamity event. And so what was it? Well, it was it. I don't know in what form. I don't think it was a giant clown robot, or a robo-clown, if you will, crashing down. Although I wish that was the case, because I have a song entitled Robo-Clown Factory, but I don't know. I don't know. Okay, so it's basically, we've all seen Austin Powers, and Dr. Evil, when he takes off in the Big Boy at the very end of the first one, I believe. I believe
oh my god, a flying...
It's a Big Boy that also has, like, the Pennywise get up on.
So it's a flying Pennywise.
Yeah, but it's like an enormously huge, gaudy
Which is why the
version
Paul
of
Bunyan
himself.
statue is such an important figure, because really, it's like home.
Yeah, he fits right in.
Awesome.
Fair enough. All right, so now our section is questions or thoughts from the new reader. Luke, go ahead.
So there was a comment in here, kind of early on that, I'll try to find it real quick. It says, July 17th, yes, that was it. That had been the day of the smoke hole, July 17th, 1958, almost a month after summer vacation had begun, and the nucleus of the losers, Bill, Eddie, and Ben, had formed down in the Barrens. So we saw that scene that was, down in the Barrens, when Ben was running from the goons, if you will, and I don't know, I just thought it was interesting that Richie refers to them as the nucleus of the group, and I don't know if he just means like, hey, they're the 3 that kind of kicked it off and started this group that everyone else kind of gravitated towards, or if he somehow looks at them as kind of a core for some reason. I don't know, like, I don't really get the feeling that that's the case, but we know Bev came a little bit later, and Mike definitely came a little bit later. So I don't know, I just found that kind of interesting that the way he describes it as the nucleus of the losers. I don't know. Not really anything else other than that. That stood out to me for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, because I wouldn't consider Eddie nuclear or
He might be nuclear. Eddie is the nuclear option.
Ish, but I guess, and I wonder if it's because Richie may have hung out with just Bill but that was the first time there was more than 2 together. That it wasn't the nucleus of Bill and Eddie; it was the joining of Ben,
the kind of unsuspecting person that fits in, right?
Yes. And then they just grew from there.
Yeah, I think once that door was opened for Ben to be there, that's kind of what initiated this.
Because
to form.
Before Ben got in, it was Bill and Eddie. Those 2 were the ones that were together and kind of hanging out always. But then you had on the peripheral Richie and Stan even, because as soon as Richie meets Ben for the first time down there as well, I believe Stan was with him, or he said, hey, Stan's coming.
Yep,
they
were there together.
Yeah, and so, they were kind of the peripheral friends, so I think Richie and Stan, at least the way it was portrayed, that they were kind of that duo that would kind of hang out with this other duo here and there, but Ben kind of bringing it in saw it as now we're a group. I don't know if that is spot on, but it's kind of the feeling I get from where you're going with it and from that line. It does make sense to me.
So then they go on, it's a little bit more exposition of like, hey, things have been happening, and we learn about Mr. Nell almost finding the clubhouse, and Jimmy Cullum's body had washed up in the Barrens and things, and I don't know, for some reason the line right here kind of, I don't know, caught me off guard, but it just sat with me this time. It reached out and grabbed me as I was reading, and it said, but they knew better because of the sewer and storm drain system that was simply where the remains tended to finish up. So we've talked about, the Barrens, and when they dam it up, we get kind of the whole backstory of, well, if you do that, this is what's going to happen, and all of the drains are going to back up, and like, the infrastructure and everything that's laced throughout this entire book, it's all leading towards something else is going to wash up in the Barrens. And I know at the very end of chapter 1, I had questions about, well, like, where did the boat go? The paper boat. And where did Georgie's arm end up? Like, are they consumed? Or, I feel like the paper boat is gonna wash up, is, I guess, a prediction. I don't think we've seen that again. We had the picture show up in the Barrens in 1985, but
So, at the very end of the chapter 1, it tells us what happened to the boat.
I think it imagines. I don't think it says, does it?
No, it does. It says, the boat dipped and swayed and sometimes took on water, but it did not sink. The two boys had waterproofed it well. I do not know where it finally fetched up, if ever it did. Perhaps it reached the sea and sailed there forever like a magical boat in a fairy tale. All I know is that it was still afloat and still running on the breast of the flood when it passed the incorporated town limits of Derry, Maine, and there it passed out of this tale forever.
Ah, okay. All right. Fair.
So
I retract my prediction. But
sorry, the boat officially no longer comes back.
Okay, good. I like that because
we've seen the boat die on screen. So
the omniscient narrator has confirmed.
The animator died and the monster was no more. That's what happened to the boat. The author has deemed it does not belong here.
But either way, the sentiment that more things are going to wind up in the Barrens is going to continue. And, I mean, there's no doubt that the Morlock holes, as Ben puts it, is going to be a big access point to get down into the guts of the town for the kids. So, my last thought, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, but there is still something weird about Mike. I love Mike, but there is something weird about this kid. I don't know what it is. He was not affected by the smoke negatively, seemingly at all. And maybe that was just because we had Richie's bouncing off the walls in his own head perspective, and the hallucination / reality jumping thing going on is a lot for him to cope with. I get that. But, like, even when they're in they're in this 80 million, 10 million years ago scene, he, like, picks Richie up and, like, saves him from falling down a ravine at one point. And he slips and, scuffs up his knee, but I don't know, like, this kid has some kind of superpower, or things don't seem to affect him nearly the same as they affect everyone else. He's sitting there as cool as a cucumber when Richie's like, you doing okay? He's like, yeah, I'm great. Like, I'm fine. I don't know. Something's weird about this kid.
Melissa, got anything for him?
I can't find it. Sorry, I was trying to very quickly read all of the interludes. It didn't happen. Here's part of my thought, okay? Part 1. Mike was a very good, some sort of football player. That's why I can't find it, because I don't know his position, but I think it was...
It was in the second interlude that we got that.
Okay.
He was running back, I believe.
And isn't that... Okay, I'm gonna sound like a girl. That's the one that, like, runs and catches the ball and then keeps running, right?
Runs and gets handed the ball, but runs a lot more than everybody else.
That's what okay. But it's like the
He's
one
got
that runs and
great
spins...
cardiovascular skills.
Yes!
And he also played trombone in band.
So excellent breath support. So, my point is, he's incredibly athletic, incredibly good on his feet, because even when he's getting caught by, Henry Bowers.
The rock
if
fight.
If it wasn't for the mud. No, not the rock fight.
Before the rock fight.
Before the rock fight, when he's just going home and he like pushes his face in the mud.
Yes.
It was like he spun, and that was like a prelude to how athletic he was and how he was going to be on the football field. And if it wasn't for the mud, he would have made it. Something along that line.
Mm-hmm.
So part of me with what happened in Ago is that Mike is incredibly athletic. Richie, not as much of the athlete, at least with the fancy footwork, as Mike has. So that's part one of my just rebuttal, I suppose. Not that I'm disagreeing with you, but maybe offering some explanation that might help with some of that.
That is a reasonable thought process to give him an advantage in this situation.
Yes. Thought number two is he absolutely was affected by the smoke because he too was puking after and was like having to recuperate from it. So it wasn't that he wasn't at all. Maybe it wasn't as bad as with Richie, and maybe we weren't given his perspective on it. But it even says at one point, Mike's eyes were still weasel red, and from the dampness on his pants cuffs, Richie thought that maybe old Mikey had taken a ride on the stomach elevator too. And then Mike, even right after that, says, for a white boy, you did pretty good. Mike croaked and punched Richie weakly on the shoulder. So it's little things. He croaked because he doesn't have a voice because it's so raspy from the smoke. He punched weakly because he doesn't have like the physical sense to be able to do it anymore. Again, it's a lot more subtle than Richie's 100 miles an hour brain telling us about all of the things that are wrong with him, but I think it's there.
Yeah. And so one other thing that train of thought or that lines made me think, is it possible? I mean, yes, the croakiness, the watery eyes, that's from the smoke. The vomiting and the weakness, could that be from the quote-unquote time travel? From the shock of what they saw? Because we didn't get word of if any of the other ones ended up puking up the, smoke or whatever from sitting in there for as long as they had. It just makes me think of, that's not a reaction I've ever had from, no, I've never sat in a smoke hole for way too long and, wanted to, do anything like that. But the puking part kind of took me to maybe think of, I don't know if that's a complete, normal reaction. I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing out there.
Completely disagree with you, but it does say that Ben was coughing and dry retching. So,
okay,
and he left fairly early, but so it's at least somewhat maybe part of the natural reaction. I don't know. I like the idea that, hey, this is a big thing that they just went through, and it's a little bit more than, just the smoke inhalation that they're going through. I just, as you were saying that, saw the words dry retching. I was like, oh, what's this about?
Fair. Nope, completely fair. It was just, like I said, just something popped in my mind. So, alright, we're going to move on to our favorite things of this episode. I'll start this one off. Excuse me. Well, fuck you. She whirled around and took the others and looked at the others, and they flinched from her gaze. So hot, it was nearly radioactive. Fuck all of you if you think the same thing. Beverly standing up for herself to the group to prove that she is one of them, not just the girl of the group, not just, the one to be around because she's pretty. She is one of them. She's a part of them, and if they don't want her around for that reason, then she's out, and she's gone for good. Thank you. Good for you, and like Melissa said, where did that girl go? Luke, what was your favorite thing?
I kind of wanted to... I had a thought when you were going through your Bev stuff, and it sucks that she had to do that. It's unfortunate that she had to do that, but it's also kind of one of those unfortunately true for this situation. It's so accurate, and that's what's more shitty about it. And that's really all I wanted to add is it's unfortunately accurate, and I'm glad she took that agency back for herself and said, just force the issue of if you're gonna fucking treat me like this, guess what? I'm not doing this because I get treated like shit at home. I get separated out at home. No, I'm either one of you or I'm not here.
And it's you're right, Luke. It's a crappy situation, but it's so systematic. That's just how boys are taught and raised and expected to think of girls as weaker, and they can't handle it. And we got to protect them, and fuck that. So, it's a systematic issue that why wouldn't she be able to? Nothing she's ever done other than happening to have an extra X chromosome has ever proved that she couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
No.
It's really frustrating to me. And I like that King put it in because it's just, that's what happens all the time in lots of situations. So I'm glad it's there.
Absolutely.
That her lashing back,
Yeah, and unfortunately, especially in this time frame, it was expected for the chivalry of, hey, quote unquote chivalry, but it also turns out into just like
chauvinism. It's like the same root word.
It still happens.
No, and I know it does, and I'm not disagreeing. That's why this was my favorite line, my favorite part of this is because, good for you, girl, because thank you. And you proved, and the only thing I wish you would have maybe called out is looking over at Eddie when he said, what was your asthma, you little pussy?
Well, she did call him. She did
well,
say
I know, I was
but
adding
to use that word specifically against him for that purpose.
You can't even, walk down a ravine without blasting off. Just call him out even a little bit more kind of thing. But the way she did it was perfect, and it worked. It's just me being an asshole. It would have been funnier. Like that one little extra funny line.
But I think if she had done that, then she would have been just as bad as the boys.
She would have been attacking him and making it a gender thing as opposed to we're all friends thing.
No, and I do agree. I'm looking again. I'm just being a smartass on
and
that note.
Eddie was just like,
"Oh no, I get it," but yeah,
no, agree.
Eddie's like, "I didn't say anything. I didn't do anything.
Whoa, hold on.
I'm just here."
Like the side note, did like the line of with Bev when she starts coughing or whatever, and she's like, "But then not fair. I'm the we already have a stutterer in the group."
Yeah,
that was just a funny line on his part. All right, Luke, what was your favorite thing?
I'm gonna give Melissa credit for what actually is my favorite thing, but I want to give maybe an honorable mention to the kid in you just leaked out sequence that we talked about. It was really well described, and I think most people that grow up and start feeling that can relate to it pretty easily. And I don't know, I like the way King writes, and that's just one of those. Yeah, maybe it wasn't all that long ago that I was kind of going through that myself, getting used to it, and that's just well
Welcome
done
to adulthood.
I know, right? Yep.
You're gonna love it.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, so what was your actual favorite thing?
Well, it's what you have written there, so I'll let you take it away.
So Melissa, go ahead.
Okay, Mike said, "It's always been here, since the beginning of time, since before there were men anywhere, unless maybe there were just a few of them in Africa somewhere, swinging through the trees or living in caves. The crater's gone now, and the Ice Age probably scraped the valley deeper and changed some stuff around and filled the crater in, but it was here then, sleeping maybe, waiting for the ice to melt, waiting for the people to come. It has always been here. Yeah. It is a staple. This is not something that's come in to hurt the people of Derry. This is Derry before Derry was Derry. This is Derry. He just is. This is his home, and people have landed in his spot, and it belongs to it."
Yeah. And so my only question to that line and I love it, absolutely, it's beautiful, but do we really think he only fed on humans?
Oh, no, definitely not.
It's reasonable to believe all the animals running. I mean, granted, they run from fear and all that, but reasonable to believe that if he doesn't have humans around here, whatever, he's going to go for the animals, but he's found now that humans are That's
exactly what I was thinking as I was reading this day. I'm like, oh, what did he eat until the people came? Gotta be the animals, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he needs to feed. That's it. I mean, it almost seems like the humans, because we know that he feeds off of terror a bit too, right? I mean, at least there's some kind of connection between him and either...
It seasons the meat.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sport for him at least. So the complexity of the human brain has to be more titillating for him to feast on due to the more complex terrors that are out there compared to, like, what's a deer afraid of? Like everything. Like it's not like a challenge. It's not entertaining for him. It doesn't, the amplification of the complexity of the human mind, I think, is something that truly, truly helps satiate his needs. And, I don't know, I really like the fact that the whole scene of a go, I was not anticipating that. This is a great line that you picked out here, and it's just huge. I love big history. I love science fiction, and this is way more than a horror story, and I love it. Not even just for this, but also for the Beverly thing, and all of these other social justice things that he's just naturally woven into the story to get his point across, that being Stephen King, that there's some fucked up shit out there, and guess what? You live with it every day, too. So, I like like what he's able to do with this book.
So do you think there were more than one It's?
That's actually a very interesting point that I was kind of working through in my head. Because I'm a big fantasy magic fan as well, so there's a lot of theories out there in different fantasy stories about hinges of magic, like bastions of magic, kind of with higher magical density in certain areas, and this is kind of like saying, yeah, this is specifically the location that this, if we want to call it a magical hinge point in whatever these... To bring it down a little bit, this is a highly magical dense area due to this instance. I'd say it's very likely that there are more, and potentially the reverse as well, you know? And we kind of heard about that town in Texas early on in one of the interludes where it's like, it seems like it's the exact opposite. So I think it probably could be. It could be the exact polar mirror to this, and a very similar thing could have happened there, I don't know.
Or in Buffy terms, this is the Hellmouth.
That's what I was thinking too. Like, let's build a high school on it.
Right. But actually, like, that kind of makes me think now, since this crash landing caused cause and effect, a crater typically creates a mountain, you know, somewhere else. So, I mean, I know Texas is relatively flat, but who's to say that the crater from Derry didn't shockwave deep down and raise up?
That's not quite how tectonics works.
I know.
For a story, sure.
All right, Melissa, any final thoughts?
Nope, I'm good, thanks.
All right, no problem. Luke?
No, great chapter. I like how...
I knew you would like this one.
Short it was. Like, it got to the point, and it just did it. And I thought it was done well.
So, alright, follow us on social media at FloatsDownHere. Send us a digital balloon at floatsdownhere@gmail.com. Make sure you check out this show and all of our other shows at thepodcastthat.com. Subscribe and rate us on iTunes.
And YouTube.
This show and all of our shows at the podcast are wonderful Imaginary Legion Patreons. Please learn more about our reward tiers at patreon.com/stayimaginary.
And until next time, we will be talking about Chapter 16, Eddie's Bad Break. You'll float too.
Alright, well that just gave away why he'll be in the emergency room, but until then, stay imaginary.
Thanks.